Hey guys, today's video is about neutral. I sped that up really quickly because I really wanted to get over it. So today's video I wanted to talk about what I think about neutral. It's more of a thought dump than any sort of tutorial or guide. So maybe people will disagree on this. I expect people to, and if there's any disagreements I'd like to talk about it because I think it's really interesting. So the way I think about neutral is that I immediately have to establish what the threats are. I guess before that I should describe what neutral is. Neutral to me is how people go from a state of trying to find a hit, or like when a state when nobody has any clear advantage, and neutral ends when somebody finds some sort of block stun. Yeah, basically block stun is the easiest way to describe it, but it can also be a situational advantage, like putting somebody in the corner or having somebody in the air while you're on the ground, some sort of positional advantage, or any time advantage, like having a life lead essentially makes it so that you're not really in neutral while you have the advantage. The other player has to come back with the, trying to get the life lead back or try to erase it in some way. So that's kind of what I think about neutral. The way I think about how neutral can be won is a lot of different threat zones and I guess win objectives for me and threats from the opponent. What a win objective could be for your team, if you're playing Peacock for example, is being able to set up a sufficient zoning trap, like set up like a certain amount of time where you are zoning and the opponent can't do anything, where you're doing chip damage to them and you have positional advantage and you are basically winning that time. That's a good positional advantage. That's a good like neutral advantage from neutral, like an advantage position, sorry, for Peacock. Whereas for Philia, for example, the greatest advantage she has is when she hits somebody, because then she can go into a great mix-up game and basically kill you off any hit. And the way you should identify that, I think, is at this screen, the character select screen. The character select screen is basically going to tell you everything you need to know about what the threats are on paper. So if you look at these two teams, which are functionally identical almost, the only differences are the point characters, and yeah, the point characters are the only difference. So, but that's extremely important because that changes dramatically what the different threat zones are for each character. So for Parasoul, Philia, Big Ben, the team on the left, let's say my team, and as opposed to the team on the right, which is the opponent's team, my team has napalm shot assist. Wait, let's think about like what the point scenario is. I have Parasoul, and then I have Philia and Big Ben in the back. I have Philia covering the ground, which covers 80% of the ground, and I have beat extend, which covers a decent amount of the air. Let's just show that in game actually, whereas we can talk about the other scenario when we go back to character selection or something. So if you look at this, I have Parasoul, I have Philia covering the ground, and they're set to block, and I have beat extend, which covers the air. Beat extend covers like a decent amount of the airspace and a little bit of the ground space, whereas Philia covers the ground space really well. So these are the two threat zones that I have with my assist. And then I have to think about what Parasoul has. Parasoul has really good stuff like jumping light punch, obviously, like that's one of the main threats you think about when you think about Parasoul. You have crouching medium punch, which is a thing that covers the ground. You have tear shot. You have these tear shots which cover the ground. You have this one that covers the air. You have tear toss. You have stuff like this. You have different heights you can do with this. And I'm gonna try to hit the grounded one. I'm gonna try doing it. There you go. You have like a grounded covering one. So you have these sort of threats in your immediate vicinity. So what Parasoul has here is a lot of the stuff that covers her her front, a little bit above her, and a lot in front of her. Essentially in the infinite space if you think about tear shot, but tear shot's not very threatening. If you get hit by a tear shot, it doesn't mean too much. Except on this team, you have tear shot. Let me show this. You have access to this, which is really scary. Which means with Parasoul, I have this option that another Parasoul team might not have, like say Parasoul Big Band or something. They don't have this option immediately available to them because they can't really combo for tear shot. So that's the difference of this team, is that my team has with 2 bars I have a big threat of if people get hit by any tier shot, I get a full combo. If they get hit by anything in the air, obviously due to my Parasoul's air normals, I get a full combo. And if they get hit by beat extend, for example, they get a combo. If they have to block Philia's hairbolt, I get a mix-up. So these sort of threats is what you establish as your own win objectives. Is I cover the ground with my tier shots and my hairbolt calls. Oh, sorry, hairbolt calls, that one. And if they are jumping at me, I have access to beat extend, which covers the air really well. So these are my sort of threats, and if hitting them or blocking them can be considered one of my win objectives. Similarly for the opponent, now let's look at Philia example. Let's do that and swap the teams around. If you think about Philia, what does Philia have? Philia has, if you look at her normals, she has Standing Heavy Punch, which is one of the best ground-to-air normals in the game. She has access to an uppercut, which covers the air again. She has drills, which cover the ground at different heights. Not different heights, different lengths. If you think about the assists here, she has access to Tear Shot, which clears the ground for her, or to some degree clears the ground for her. It creates a projectile that Philia can follow in, and it can also help her with her pressure and block strings and stuff like that. And so that's the benefit of Tear Shot. And again, Beat Extend, same deal as the Parasoul example, it covers the air. So Philia and Parasoul in this scenario really have similar threat zones. They both have assists that cover the ground here. They both have Beat Extend, these both teams for example. And they both kind of cover the ground and the air by themselves. Except Philia has access to this sort of thing. She has access to instant air dash, jump light punch, which is a really good approach tool from mid-range, like around about here. Now, if they block it or get hit by it, now they have to deal with a mix-up. And if I call Parasoul behind it, if I am good at this, now Tear Shot is coming, and now they have to be afraid of that. And then like Tear Shot is coming, and now they have to block it. And if they push block me away, I still have a tear on top, and now I get a bit of mix-up. So these are the threats I'm thinking about. Or I'm also thinking about that if they block anything, I have a Tear Shot available. If I show that with, now they have to block a Tear Shot as soon as they block, and now I have the pressure from the Tear Shot. So these are the sort of the threats you have to establish immediately, and these are the things you have to think about when you're playing against your opponent. Like, what are the different things he can do, or the opponent can attack me with, and according to that, you have to try to think about how you can position away from them, or avoid them, or just beat them. Because Tear Shot, like if you think about Tear Shot assist, I can't really use Tear Shot freely neutral if the opponent has, say, Brass assist, because the Brass assist will just go through it. And if you think about those sort of things, that you start to establish what the different options are for your team and your opponent's team, and that sort of leads to the next sort of thing I want to talk about, which is the general decision-making flowchart. It's difficult, it's not something that people often talk about, but I think decision-making, at least in Skullgirls, can be really, you can really just make it into a flowchart. And not in the sense of, oh, they are close to me, sure you can, the Street Fighter 4 can flowchart. What I think about is, my actions should be leading to, for example, at the very start, like it goes in decreasing order of importance, not importance, like decreasing order of priority. So if I can immediately hit somebody, like one of these, not even just that, especially hit, so it leads to a full combo, that means I should take it, which means anything from a punish scenario to, basically, like, if you can take a free punish, you should take a free punish. That's kind of obvious, but like you have to think about that from that basic A level. If you can get a punish on somebody, you should go take it. If they are, say, Beowulf, for example, and if they did the blitzer up and then back, you can go hit them with anything you can, you should go take it, for example. If you can't really hit them for free, you can try to mix them up, which is now where the blocking comes from. Now, this blocking mix-up, now, for example, like this, like now I have an opportunity to mix somebody up, and then I should, if it's worth it to mix somebody up, you also have to think about that. Like, if you think about whether you can mix someone up, like if you let's just do the full like flowchart so we can talk about the steps individually. So my action should lead to hitting them. If not, then mixing them up. / is it worth mixing them up? If not, then reposition to a favorable spot where I can hit them or mix them up. If I can't do that, then I have to defend. And if you think about the logical progression of these steps, if I can hit somebody for free, which means there's a punish scenario, or somebody whiffed an uppercut, or somebody, I don't know, whiffed a throw or anything like that. If you can hit them during that time, you should go hit them. That's kind of obvious, but like again, it bears repeating because it is important to the fundamental flowchart at hand. And if you can't hit them for free, you should try to mix them up. But then it depends on whether the mix-up is safe or not. If you think about, in this scenario, going in like this and going for a mix-up is pretty free. And you, like this is pretty safe, right? But what if they just call beat extend, for example? Oh jeez, that's not good. Like, obviously trying to mix them up at this point, it wasn't worth it because I got hit. Then maybe it isn't worth trying to mix them up at this point. So now you have to think about the next option, which is reposition to a favorable spot. And this is again where the different threat zones come into play. So if you think about the different threat zones your team has and the different threat zones your opponent's team has, you can often find some sort of positioning or some sort of spacing or some sort of height advantage or anything like that where you have the advantage, where you can, like, you know for a fact that it's worth it to mix them up at this point, where it is safe. For example, like, now it is worth it to mix them up, right? Because now I baited their assist, and now they can't hit me. The beat extend is not going to hit me blindly for free. So I repositioned to a favorable spot. I made the beat extend whiff, and now I can go in. For example, I'm not doing a very good job of it. Like, for example, sort of stuff like this. Like, this sort of stuff is very important when you think about how to make decisions in neutral, and this is sort of the core tenet. And if you can't do that, then it's very, very obvious that, or it's extremely likely that you have to learn how to, like, you have to focus on defending. If, so let's think about a scenario like, let's assume Philia was in frame disadvantage at this time. Like, I couldn't get away from the beat extend. I couldn't just jump away. Like I couldn't just, I had to block it. I couldn't mash buttons. Like it's kind of bad right here, but hopefully you understand what I mean. Where sometimes it's just, you can't hit a button, you can't jump away, you can't reversal because they're blocking safely behind their assist. Then in that spot, you just should be defending. You should be learning to block properly. You should learn how the different ways of blocking something could be. For example, beat extend, if you block it crouching, there's only one hit, like this. Whereas if you block it standing, there are 2 hits, for example, which lock you down for more block stun, and there's more time for the opponent to mix you up. And if you chicken block it, for example, that's kind of a bad example. Like that, like you still block those 2 hits, but then you can mix up like doing an air push block or versus a ground push block, and then the different ways you could defend. Like if you block just 1 hit, it has low block stun, so you could try to abare out. Or if you push block more, this is gonna be easier to show with hitboxes on, obviously. See how much more block stun I was in? Like, that's so much more block stun I am in. As opposed to like just not blocking it immediately. Like, see, like the difference is pretty big. Like you see the difference here, right? Like this is how early I could mash, or this is how early I can jump. Like that amount of time, I could like try to do a push block absolute guard, or at the end of it, I could do a push block guard cancel. Or I could just not push block it and then try to push block the hit afterwards. There's a lot of ways you could defend. And that's what, when you think about neutral, that's what it comes down to, is these 4 core tenets of hitting them for free if possible. If not, then mixing them up. / knowing when it's worth to mix them up. Maybe you think, if you think about, say, risk reward. See, this is where risk reward comes into play. Is if I was trying to mix them up, and if I'm in this position, and I do get the mix up right, like I do actually like maybe this like this, maybe doing this isn't that worth it if my Philia could just die. Like how would I show this? It's kind of hard to show this, so I'm not gonna actually show it. But you have to believe. You just take my word for it. For example, like let's see in this scenario, Philia has 1,000 life. Philia will easily die to a beat extend into a combo, like a little bit of a hit. Like this does what damage 758. Like let's say I only have 750 life, for example. Then going in with against this beat extend is really not worth it because I just died at the beat extend call, even if the point character gets hit by something. If you have enough life to, or if you don't have enough life to survive a beat extend hit into a full combo, then similarly it might not be worth it, but it might be worth with a certain assist, for example, where if you get hit but they still have to block an assist, for example, like a George or something, then maybe it's worth it to actually go in. And then you also have to think about your opponents, the amount of life your opponent has. If they can just die to this grab, oh what the, if they can just die to this grab, for example, like for example if this kills or something like that, like an actual throw combo, if that just kills them, then maybe it is worth it to you. I don't know. This is where different philosophies come into play. And this is also where sort of the post-hit mix-up of Skullgirls comes into play as well, because if you think about anime games, you can do a full combo, like, you can't immediately, like, guarantee a kill after a full combo in an anime fighter. But because of the nature of resets in Skullgirls, you can do a half combo and then go into a reset and do a half combo. And because of the unpredictable nature of resets, it might be more worth it to gamble those sort of things. Like, you could try to gamble on the fact that your opponent is going to die in the next 1.5 hits, for example, if you think about how Indizzy works out and everything. Because you could just, you know for sure that you could land that mix-up. Or because you can mix up when you go for this mix-up because of the way resets work. This is something that doesn't really work in anime games like Guilty Gear or Dragon Ball or BlazBlue, for example. Actually maybe not BlazBlue, I don't really know much about BlazBlue. But Guilty Gear and Dragon Ball, for example, it's way more concrete as far as how many hits you're gonna need. And this is why the example of half hits of Skullgirls is what I talked about. Is if you could land I can land a hit at this point, and I could land 3 mix-ups, and Philia, not even 3 mix-ups, maybe 2 mix-ups. Like 1 hit into 2 mix-ups could easily kill somebody on a 3v3 team. And this is where you have to think about like how much damage you can do, how much meter you have, and again, those sort of things all come into play. Is how much can you really make something work? Like, how do I do this? Like, is it worth it to go in at this point? They're blocking everything. That's pretty annoying. Let's set them to not block everything. Like, this, normally, it wouldn't be worth it. I'll drop it. I drop it again. Normally don't drop this. Oh. Oh god. Like, this is so worth it, right? Because now I killed their big band. Like, if you think about how much life they had, this mix-up, maybe it was worth going for. Maybe it was worth trying to mash out. Or if you were going to die, like, if you were going to, if you think about, like, what other defensive options you could take, you could do this and then call your own big band, for example. And if you land this hit, then, like, defending and calling beat extend, that would have been worth it because you can carry the opponent to the corner. Maybe that would have been worth it to you. Maybe it isn't if your team can't do this. Then again, your team structure comes into play. And this is all sort of things what you have to think about. And I'm sorry this is really unstructured and everything, but I'm going to put in, like, a little bit of a summary in the description. So hopefully it'll be easier to share with people and try to think about what I'm trying to say here. Because I am clearly not very adept at making cool videos that show this sort of stuff, like, really concisely and cleanly. But hopefully this sort of makes sense of how neutral works. So I guess a summary would be how neutral works is that both players are trying to fish. Both people are in a let's summarize and go back to the very basics. Neutral is when both people can't directly hit each other. Okay, let's even go further than that. Neutral is when no player is in a state of advantage due to like forcing blockstun or hitstun or having positional advantage, or having any sort of situational advantage, like having a life lead, or having, you know, being in a proper position for yourself. Like if you're Peacock, being in your comfortable range, like that sort of stuff. That's what neutral is. Going from a spot where nobody has that, and neutral is a spot where nobody has any sort of clear advantage, and non-neutral would be a spot where somebody does have that advantage, to break it down in really simple terms. And the way to think about neutral is think about your attack zones. Some people call them attack vectors. I think about zones more than vectors, but you can think of either one of them. It doesn't really matter too much. So if you think about your different assists, they obviously play as different attack zones, but your own character's normals and your different movement options can also play a part in that. If you think about Philia can easily attack her Parasoul with IED, jump, light punch, jump, light kick right here, but she can't really do that over here unless she does a dash. And then that sort of changes what the timings are and what the spacings are for a character's certain threat zone. Like here, Philia is not a threat to hit you with anything really meaningful aside from like a drill or something. But here, it's an obvious threat. You could get hit by one of these, you could get tagged by one of these, you could tag by one of these, you could get tagged by one of these, you could just wait, and if the opponent sticks yourself into anything, you could like hit them with one of these. This could hit if your opponent hits anything, stuff like that. And similarly for your opponent, what your opponent's attack threats are what they could hit you with. For example, Parasoul has, let me show this. Parasoul has a standing jab, she has scratching medium punch, she has jumping light punch, she has tier toss stuff. She has tier shots, she has her own assists like Philia call, or goddammit, or a big band call. Like these sort of things matter. And these teams are extremely similar because they literally have the same characters with just a different order. But this is gonna be really different in any different combinations. Like Valentine Cerebella, for example, that team has completely different threat zones. Not completely different, like, you know, reasonably different threat zones. Or a Peacock team which has completely different threat spacings they want to be at, as opposed to like Philia or Parasoul, which they want to be over here somewhat. Whereas Peacock would kind of like to be over here, or maybe she wants an item charge, in which case that's another positioning advantage that she has, because she's over here now. She gets to charge item for free, and now she can go, and then she could go in and try to pressure you with the item. There's a lot of those things that sort of affect the way you think about the different decisions you could make in neutral, and the 4 different tenets by which you make decisions is this little decision flowchart. And I'll repeat it once again. It's my actions should lead to hitting them for free. If not, then mixing them up, / is it worth to mix them up? Then, if not possible, then reposition to a favorable spot where I can hit them or go for a favorable mix-up. If I can't do that, then I have to defend. So hopefully this sort of makes sense. And if it doesn't, please let me know. I am more than happy to clarify anything of this. It's probably not going to have the greatest video editing or anything like that, because I'm just not very good at it. Hopefully I like to make those sort of videos more clear with proper video editing and like actual subtitles and stuff like that soon. But I just want to make this little thought dump. Hopefully this is useful for anybody, and I'll see you guys later. Peace.